What makes Holy Paladin feel so good? I think the answer to that question is Beacon of Virtue, but I'd like to go into a little bit more detail as to why that is, which means I'm going to be talking about damage patterns and healer toolkits. So playing a healer is a little bit different than playing a DPS, in my opinion. Obviously, you're performing a different role in the game, but I think what makes a DPS spec feel good to play or feel fun to play is because of its rotation. Having a rotation that is simple enough but also difficult enough to have some depth, to have a little bit of variation with procs, and then with that rotation having enough depth as well to be able to combine different abilities to get different results, which means using different abilities and playing in slightly different ways for single target versus AoE, for burst versus sustain, things like that. But a lot of those things don't really work for healers. Procs, for example, like completely random procs, in some ways, many times can be useless for healers because healers play a slightly different game in where a lot of the time they are reacting to or preparing for what's coming. They're dealing with different damage patterns. And healers on a fundamental level aren't designed to be particularly complex. The damage patterns you respond to is what's supposed to be the challenging part of playing a healer, not the rotation of the healer itself. And for that reason, I think that what makes a healer fun to play is the toolkit it has, not the rotation that it uses to perform its role. And having an on-demand AoE heal or AoE mechanic that's up 50% of the time in Beacon of Virtue is a hugely impactful and fun tool to play around as a Holy Paladin. The general premise of this video is to discuss what I see as a kind of different gear or the ability to heal AoE damage patterns that, let's say, 4 of the 7 healers in the game currently have. Now, I would like to preface this discussion by saying that at the moment I think that all healers can heal all content, particularly in Mythic Plus. So I don't want this to come off as me saying that, you know, there are a couple of specs that just can't do what the other good healers can do or anything. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think objectively all healers are strong. All healers are capable. But I do think that I have enjoyed what I think a lot of people would consider to be the meta healers at the moment, because they all have a way to do a lot of AoE healing or party-wide group healing without having to rely heavily on cooldowns, like long cooldowns. When I say cooldowns, I mean 1, 2, 3 minute cooldowns. Holy Paladins having Beacon of Virtue means that every 15 seconds they have the ability to basically group heal the whole party. And that means being able to top the whole party's health bars repeatedly in an 8-second window. I don't have to rely on a big 3-minute cooldown. I don't have to rely on some janky stack mechanic or anything. They can just press a button and group heal rotationally. I think Resto Druids manage the same thing because Wild Growth is only a 10-second cooldown. They can spread HOTS to their whole group if they need to. They get a little bit of extra power from their stacked healing, but they also have the ability to just heal the whole party effectively all the time. Same with Evokers. Particularly strong because they can spread echoes to the whole party or to multiple party members who get debuffs or who are about to take damage and things like that. That again isn't reliant on a long cooldown. At the moment the play seems to be that every 15 seconds you can use Temporal Anomaly to apply Echo to your whole party, and then you can either use Reversion or Dream Breath or Verdant Embrace. You have rotational buttons again to heal your whole party very consistently, very often. And then what we've seen happen with 10.0.5 is that Discipline has effectively joined this group of healers. And that is because the enormous buff to Power Word Radiance, the on-hit heal of Power Word Radiance is now 410-ish% spell power on 5 targets, again on a 15-second cooldown. So they also have the ability, they have to stand still for 2 seconds to do it, but they have the ability to, again, rotationally group heal their whole party. And on top of it, they also have the usual Atonement group healing. So after the Atonements are applied, they now have quite strong damage buttons in Double Mind Blast, Dark Penance, and also Shadow Covenant, to give them even more ways to group heal rotationally. Now, I think those 4 healers are the best designed healers in the game right now. From a fun toolkit to play, feeling like you can play a healer that kind of always has an answer to anything that's happening. something goes wrong, you always have a button to press to heal your whole group. And you're not necessarily taking a button away from something else. Like, I could say that if something goes wrong, Mistweaver has that same ability in Revival, because they can heal their whole party with one button. But usually, especially in higher keys, your big 1, 2, 3 minute cooldowns are usually planned out fairly well. And if you use Revival to make up for a mistake at minute 1, you're not going to have it for that planned mechanic at minute 2, as an example. The remaining 3 healers is Resto Shaman, Mistweaver, and Holy Priest. I'm going to start this comparison or this discussion on the other end of the spectrum, the healers that don't have that kind of gear that they can go into, the group healing, rotationally, kind of just not really having to commit in any big ways to cooldowns or anything, just having the ability to heal your whole party through anything. So the healers that don't have that, like I said, Mistweaver, Resto Shaman, and Holy Priest. Now I would like to start with Holy Priest because Holy Priest is a good example of the exact opposite of something like a Holy Paladin. Holy Paladins have Virtue to AoE heal whenever they need it, rotationally. Holy Priests lack that exact mechanic. So imagine that there was a DPS spec that had no AoE abilities that were worth pressing. And every time they went into a pack in a Mythic Plus dungeon or something, they did damage by effectively only ever hitting one enemy at a time and just cycling through or rotating through different enemies to hit. I think that, especially to take this metaphor a little bit further, also imagine that you go into a Mythic Plus key, and if you have 3 DPS players, they're all playing that same spec. Because as a healer, you don't really have anyone else in a Mythic Plus environment to pick up the slack that you're lacking. If there's an area of your toolkit that you struggle to perform in, or if there's an aspect of healing or a damage pattern that you can't quite respond to well as a healer, you have no one else there to back you up. So if you went into a normal dungeon and you were playing this supposed DPS spec that doesn't have any AoE abilities at all, at least none worth pressing, they're tuned so poorly that pressing a single target damaging ability does more damage all the time than any AoE ability, right? So you're effectively playing a spec that has no AoE. If you took 3 of those guys into a Mythic Plus dungeon, you would have serious trouble. Not always, but you would run into problems. And that is what Holy Priest is, in my opinion. It doesn't have any good AoE. You have Sanctuary that you can press or Sanctify every minute, and you have a 12-second cooldown on Circle of Healing that doesn't really do that much. But overall, throughout a key, throughout every damage pattern, no matter what happens, as a Holy Priest, the lion's share of your healing is always going to be heal, flash heal, Serenity. You get a little bit, I wouldn't really call it AoE, but the Trail of Light, 40% of your heal or flash heal on a target gets copied to your previous heal or flash heal target. It's not true AoE. Even combined with Binding Heal, I think 20% of your healing with heal and flash heal gets duplicated back to you. So effectively, you can kind of pseudo heal 3 people per cast, but you're not really. I mean, most of your healing is really just going to be on the target you're hitting at that time when you cast the spell. Even with this lacking part of the Holy Priest toolkit in Mythic Plus, the AoE or the lack of true AoE healing, it can still perform fine. So my criticism here isn't really with objectively how strong Holy Priest is or what it can do. It's more in the, I guess you would call it quality of life or how it does its healing. The issue I think that Holy Priest kind of exemplifies here with the remaining 3 healers, the Resto Shaman, Mistweaver, and Holy Priest, is that it heals every different damage pattern the same way. Doesn't matter if it's burst, single target damage or tank damage that you're healing. Doesn't matter if it's AoE damage or one big hit that the whole group takes, or it's rot damage, or any damage pattern is always healed the same way. You just cast heal, flash heal, and Serenity. Resto Shaman and Mistweaver, I would say, both have that part of their toolkit is lacking, the AoE healing gear that the meta healers have right now. I think Mistweaver and Resto Shaman are still lacking in this way, but nowhere near as bad as Holy Priest. Resto Shaman has decent AoE healing if the group is stacked. It uses a lot of mana to do it, which is somewhat of a problem, and it is effectively just hard casting chain heals. but it still has the button if it needs it. I think in 10.0.7 that could get significantly better with the changes to Chain Heal and the talent swaps and stuff to get Tidebringer into the talent tree. And Mistweaver has, in a kind of similar vein to Chain Heal, Mistweaver has Vivify. Mistweavers also have the ability to drop a Phalanx Stomp, stand on it, and spam Spinning Crane Kick on packs. So long as they can hit multiple enemies, I consider this to be pretty much a pseudo AoE heal. It heals 3 targets, but there are so many hits going out so often that you effectively keep your whole team top so long as you can Spinning Crane Kick multiple enemies. The problem is that as soon as you get to a single target or a boss fight or something, this gear or this mechanic goes away. Now, those two abilities aren't anything like as powerful as a Resto Druid blanketing the party with hearts, or a Preservation Evoker having its echoes and reversions out on the whole party, or Discipline Priest pressing Powered Radiance and then going into its Dark Disc damage, Atonement healing pattern. But Vivify is still there. It is technically a true AoE heal, it just isn't that strong in its cleave healing. Most of the power from Vivify is going to come from the Gusts of Mists and the increased healing on the target of your Vivify. What I think Mistweaver does have, which is really strong at the moment, Mistweaver has Celestial. So if you press something like Yulon or Shiji and you press Enveloping Mist, especially if you're a casting Mistweaver and you have Tear of Mourning, that Enveloping Mist healing gets cleaved onto everyone with Renewing Mist, and the breath from your Celestial will also AoE heal. So every minute, if you want it, you can effectively, you have that gear that you can go into. Now, the other healers can do it rotationally every 10, 15 seconds or whatever. Mistweaver can at least do that every minute. And when it does every minute, it does it it's very strong. It's numerically powerful. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not talking about the objective power of different healing specs. I think you can play Holy Priest at the highest level and make it work. I think you can take Mistweaver into high keys and still make it work. I'm just talking about the quality of life differences or the toolkit differences between the different healing specs as they stand at the moment, and why I think, at least one of the reasons why the meta healers are the meta healers. As far as what I would like to see changed or added to these final 3 healers to bring them up to a similar level as the meta healers, I actually think a lot of that has either partially happened in 10.0.5 or is going to happen in 10.0.7. Things like Mistweaver's getting Shaylun's Gift and being able to cleave it onto 5 targets, Resto Shaman's getting Tidebringer, the PvP talent, and Mistweaver's getting TFT to make their Enveloping Mist instant cast, which was something like Tear of Mourning adds significantly to their ability to group heal rotationally. Holy Priest is also getting significant buffs to its Divine Image playstyle and those talents. Although Holy Priest is the healer that I consider to be lacking the most in this regard, I would love to see a talent or something brought back similar to what Holy Priest had in the past, where they could get a proc which caused their next Prayer of Mending to automatically bounce and work through all of its charges without requiring the damage tick to happen. Let me know what you think about this, or if I'm way off base or something here in the comments. Thank you for watching, and algorithm stuff.